Hey guys, welcome to my first illustration discussion video where I'm going to take you through my illustration process and discuss my thoughts on the subject that I'm illustrating. So getting right into it, I have two main ways that I start off an illustration. I either begin with a sketch that I've done by hand in a sketchbook and then scanned into the computer, or I do it all in computer. This time I've decided to start off with a sketch. I don't really have any rhyme or reason for why I do one way or the other. I just sort of go with whatever I feel like at the time and whatever real world time constraints I have on myself. So in the case of using an illustration I've created in a sketchbook, I have this process of actions where I'm able to essentially remove the white background from the image but still keep the sketchwork intact. I do this mainly so that I can quite easily turn the illustration red without bogging down the file, like I would if I were to just put it on, say, multiply. That tends to make the file bigger and it just kind of turns everything into a mess way too early on in the process. Once I've done that, I then create a layer for my line art to keep that all separate from the rest of the illustration. For this illustration, I wanted to keep it very soft and sketch-like, so I have a brush that I downloaded that does its best to emulate charcoal pencil, and I really like working with it. It creates a very clean sketch, and I think it worked really well for the tone that I wanted to convey in this illustration, which was very soft and innocent and sweet. The moment I wanted to capture more than anything else was just a childlike happiness and innocence. The subjects for my illustration are Noctis, his father Regis, and Carbuncle from Final Fantasy XV. I decided to create this illustration because Square Enix were running a special first year anniversary competition for the game where they asked fans to create an illustration that had a Moogle in it. It had to be focused around the Moogle. It didn't necessarily have to be just the Moogle. And when I was thinking about what I would like to do for this competition, I thought Moogles are really fun and cute, and I want to convey the cute sweetness of it all, and I thought what better way to focus on one of my favorite aspects of Final Fantasy, the relationship between Noctis and his father, than to have a sweet moment shared during Noctis' childhood. For me, the most poignant moments in the relationship between Noctis and Regis came about in the Platinum demo for Final Fantasy XV, the Brotherhood anime, and the first Dawn trailer that we had for the game. They're really powerful moments, and you can see just how much Noctis loves and adores his father, and it's almost heartbreaking after seeing all these moments to see what their relationship has become during the main body of Final Fantasy XV, to show Noctis' childhood and the happiness he had with his father, even if it wasn't to last forever. Alright, once the line art is done, I then go ahead and make a color palette for the base colors of the illustration to begin with, and make separate layers for the base of the hair, skin, clothing, mouth, irises, and basically every separate colored area of each individual. Now, this is totally up to you how you want to color. Just me personally, for my own sanity, I like to keep them all separate just so I know where everything is and I don't get confused about what is on each layer. It's not foolproof because sometimes I get lazy and I put two colors on one layer and I create a massive headache for myself later, but for the most part I stick to this rule and it works out pretty well for me. Something I find really funny when I do these illustrations is I always color the skin layer in before I do any part of the eyes and the mouth, and the characters always end up looking like they're possessed or something for ages because I put down this dark layer background, so when I'm coloring the lighter colors I don't miss any circles. But yeah, it always makes them look a little bit scary until I color in their irises and their eyes. You might also notice throughout the video that another image will pop up on my artboard every now and then that doesn't seem to make any sense in relation to the subject matter of Final Fantasy, Noctis, and Regis, and that's because I have reference images hidden away on my artboard that I often bring up every now and then when I want a refresher on what I'm aiming to achieve. These references are often either costume references for the characters or colouring references. For this illustration, I was inspired by the work of Sui Ishida, who is the mangaka of Tokyo Ghoul. I really adore how he colours his works, and I wanted to try and create a similar look for this illustration, and it's one of his illustrations that will sometimes pop up throughout this video. Once the base layers of colour are filled in, I then go in and make a layer mask and start adding the shadows and tones of the different sections of the illustration. So with the hair, I started off using a sort of charcoal style brush again that I downloaded, and then over the top of that used the hard round brush with a slight blurring on the edge to fill in the hair and make it a lot thicker and show all the different strands and things like that. I kind of wish I hadn't pushed the hair as much as I did on this illustration. I think I got to a point where I just wanted to add more and more color and more lightness because I wanted to make it really glow and stand out, but looking back on it, I'm not really sure it needed that as much. I still really like it, but I think I might have put too many colors in. And then moving on to the skin, I again used the charcoal style brush to sort of add some texture to the skin because, as you know, skin is covered in pores, and while I'm not going for anything super realistic with this illustration, I definitely wanted to add that sort of effect to the skin, even just a little bit. Then over the top of that, I used a brush that's very similar to the hard-edged brush. It has a slightly softer edge with a slight texture in it. I'm really fond of this brush. I think it adds an excellent effect to the overall colouring, and yeah, it's a joy to use. Next, I work on the irises, and this is really an exercise in just building up colour from dark to light to make them really sparkle and stand out and look like eyes, because that's what eyes do. Then with the Moogle, I kind of went to town using the charcoal brushes. The Moogle is made out of a very tough fabric because the whole idea of the Moogle is that you're supposed to throw it during battles to sort of make your target confused and attack that instead of attacking you. So it's made out of very tough material, but still very, very cute. So I wanted to definitely make the fabric look rough and reflective of the Final Fantasy XV Moogle. Now, working on metal is not one of my strong suits. I will admit that. I just kind of guesstimate what I'm doing and just go for it. And considering how intricate Regis's metalwork is on his arm brace, I just sort of felt it out as I went. The most important thing with rendering metal is to remember that metal reflects and it's shiny, so getting the sharp edges is crucial in making it look like the material it's supposed to be. One of the most important aspects of this illustration in terms of the colouring that I really knew I had to get right was Regis's cape. Now, the cape is far longer and bigger than it ever was in the game. I've completely over-exaggerated that, and I did that on purpose because I wanted his cape and the overall composition of the illustration to resemble that of the Lucis family crest. I actually had a bit of trouble when I was creating the colouring on the cape because at one point I didn't know what to do with it. It looked so dark and hollow and not good at all, and decided to just go all out and throw some pinks and purples and blues on the cape and just see where it went. And I think it turned out really well. I'm very happy that I took a gamble on that. Definitely makes the cape look way more dynamic than it initially did. And I then put some of that orange and yellow color onto Noctis and Regis's hair just to link the whole thing together and make it look like there's a bright light shining down on them. I then went ahead and added the pinstripe to Regis's suit. I didn't do this in the line art because I wanted to do it later on once the color had been added, so I wasn't too bogged down by it all and had to go back in and change it around or anything. I wanted to wait until that was all done. So when I was colouring Carbuncle, I'll admit I was kind of cutting corners. I was actually on a holiday back home in Australia when I did this, and I had a very limited amount of time that I was able to get the illustration done before the competition closed. So I did cut a few corners with Carbuncle, but he does look very soft and fluffy, and that's what I wanted. I then added the little carbuncle figurine to Regis's hand. For Regis's scarf, what I decided to do was, rather than try and draw on the pattern myself, because quite frankly that would probably drive me mad, I used a pattern brush that I downloaded. So once all the colouring work is done, it's time to add the effects to the illustration. So for this one, because Carbuncle is a summon and a very magical creature, I wanted to have him essentially coming out of a sparkly galaxy, and one of the running themes of Final Fantasy XV is this idea of fate and the stars. Having that cosmic element was definitely something I wanted to include. Like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to create the silhouette of the Lucis Caelum family crest, and in order to complete that, I of course need the pattern in the background of the crest. So basically what I did was I grabbed the crest from the internet and took it into Illustrator and just created a vector of it. I wanted to make sure it was bang on, so I did just trace over the top, but this is fan art. I wanted to do the best I could, and that was the quickest way I could do it given the time constraints that I had. And then finally, to just sort of add a bit of that stars and cosmological element to it all, I added some sparkles around the Carbuncle figurine and the Moogle's little red jewel. And then for the background, I used a very rough charcoal texture brush, added some crazy colors, and then these, I guess what I hoped would be particle effects to the front. I really could have done a lot better on them, but again, I was under time constraints and I just sort of went with it at the time. But overall, I'm very, very happy with how this illustration turned out. I think it captures the essence of Noctis and Regis's relationship when he was a child, and I had such an awesome time creating this illustration. I hope you all enjoyed watching. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to ask. If you haven't played Final Fantasy XV and perhaps this has piqued your interest, definitely check it out. It's a very, very good game. Alright guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!